Yes.
Okay, I think that we're on. The meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. Jolly good.
Are we on your page, Joe?
We're on my page. It will just be loading onto my page now. So I'll go onto my phone and just click on that and see what's happening. Let's have a look. Ready to go in 1 hour. So it hasn't come on yet. So there we go. Come on, son. There we go. Straight talking, shoot from the hip. So if I click that like that, we'll be able to see some comments and turn the sound down. That's fine. So, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Let's see. The comments will appear here. So is there anybody out there? And I think Graeme's actually sharing this to his page as well at the same time.
That's done, mate. Yeah.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just wait. Hello, Seafood Boggy. I'm looking forward to being with you next Wednesday, my old friend. I hope you're keeping well. Diana's here. Hello, Diana. Nice to meet you, see you. So what I'll do is, Graeme, thank you very much for joining me. And
Thank
Christine. You. Hello there. Bev. Hello, Bev. I'll stop looking at these comments now because I'll be distracted and I'm being rude. So great. It's nice to see you, mate.
Likewise.
What I've set this sort of channel up for is it's for people who've been through stuff and who've developed or first of all, discovered things from various parts of the world, right? And have put those things into practice in their own way. That's helped them to come through stuff. Now, when you gave me your little sort of bio, I know that you've qualified in all sorts of different modalities and therapeutic techniques, so we can talk about those later. But really, it was when you shared with me that you'd suffered from stress and anxiety and depression, and especially night terrors as well, you know. And I understand that because so have I, you know, so there's our sort of identification with one another, but you will have experienced these things in your way and me in mine, you know. And my story is, I didn't know what the hell was going on, mate, because from a thinking point of view, I had a very well-paid job in the National Health Service. I was in a high position. I was in management. I was organizing all sorts of people, and I was very successful at it, right? So on the surface, for anybody looking in, they would think that I was a successful person, but on the inside, I was crumbling and falling apart for years and years and years, you know. So as the years went on and the stress got worse, then I started to have massive panic and anxiety attacks, you know, and sometimes it would just come from nowhere because I didn't know what was going on, and I'd be paralyzed with fear. And not only would it emotionally cripple me, but sometimes it would physically stop me in my tracks and I couldn't move, you know. And I found that in order to keep moving, rather than practicing Tai Chi and stuff, because I didn't know about that sort of stuff then, what I did was I took as much alcohol as I possibly could and other mind-altering substances, which temporarily distracted me and diverted me away from the fear. And in the same process, and I'll give you the chance to speak in a minute, mate, because I don't know if I go on, you know.
I'm fascinated. I love it, Joe.
Yeah. So it disinhibited me because it temporarily obstructed those things that were causing me to be afraid, you know. And over the years, right, I've learned about the mechanisms of that, all to do with something called the limbic system and the amygdala and all those things. So we can maybe even chat about those later on, see how it develops. I've not got any sort of a plan here. I'm just going to hand it over to you in a minute so that you can introduce yourself, and then we'll just see where it goes from there. But fortunately, in 3 weeks' time, it'll be 30 years since I've taken any mind-altering substances. I gave up drinking, you know. And when I say mind-altering substances, I'm talking about anything that's linked with mind-altering substances. I know, because most of the things that we do, even breathing, can mind-alter us in ways, you know. Excuse me. And what we eat and what we drink can also have an impact upon us. But I'm talking about sort of drugs and drink that I used to use in order to get me out of the lunacy for a bit. So that's my story. I've been clean and sober now for coming up to nearly 30 years. Have I got it cracked? Not in the slightest. I'm learning. As they say, every day is a school day, you know. But to be quite honest with you, my life's become very simple, because what I tend to do now is focus on feelings first. You know, that's what I learned, because I'd sort of detached and numbed myself from my feelings. And I was just like a head on a stick, just ducking and diving and dodging and weaving and just trying to survive. Right, zip it, Joseph, and give the boy a chance to speak. Over to you, my boy.
Thank you, mate. It's a standard story. The very few people, because I appreciate you're also on what we could call a healing or spiritual path, Joe. And people who, in my experience, have really deepened into that path don't deepen into it because life's going really well. It's usually the opposite way around, you know. My predominant path, you know, as you know, I teach Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation, but I don't really speak about my predominant path that much, and I don't know why. And I think it's probably out of some kind of shame with being for it being misunderstood as I'm a religious person, because I really have no religious affiliation. So my predominant, if you like, I sometimes wonder whether I should call my Tai Chi like the heart of Taoism, or the heart, because I'm not there's two predominant pathways in Eastern mysticism that, you know, that have many branches. You have you could call it the traditional Tao Zen Chan path, which is I look into the nature of myself to understand reality. And then you have the devotional paths, you know, of Christianity, of Islam, which is really, I'm looking into the nature of the universe, whether I call that. So I'm almost looking outside of myself initially, which is, or you could call the path of like devotional mysticism. And that's really predominantly my path, or has been my path. And so you're looking into the nature of divinity, of Christ, of Buddha, of even though, you know, there's devotional Buddhism, and then there's the Zen style of insular Buddhism, you know, looking within yourself. And Tibetan Buddhism tends to be more of the devotional, you know, style. So really, that's been my predominant path, and that's where I started about when I was 21 years old, following my father's death. And my father's death was my first, what you could call, spiritual experience. Again, I use this loosely, where as he passed, I was quite a material-based person up to the moment he passed. And then the moment he passed, I literally felt he'd left. And it was like, oh, whatever he was isn't now that motionless body lying on the hospital bed. You know, that's not who he was. And then within seconds or moments of having that understanding, this just peace was just, it was like the whole universe had stopped. It was just so profound, like nothing I'd ever experienced. And up to that night, all I wanted to do was win the lottery, be a millionaire, you know, all that stuff. And suddenly that all left, and it's like, oh wow, what was that? And then I suppose I was on about it. I kind of shelved it, went through something of a grieving process, and then about a year later, I was having a chat with my niece, and she was telling me how she just finished a degree in psychology. And she, at the time, was working in a predominant prison, and she was saying that she wished she hadn't have done psychology because she found it was quite prescriptive. She said if she could rewind time, she would have liked to have done counselling, you know. And so something just that weekend, a light went on. I thought, I'm going to train to be a counsellor. You know, that sounds right for me. And at the time, I was also in a sales job that was a necessity for various reasons. I won't go into it now because that's a big story in itself, but I found myself in a job I had to do rather than what my calling I wanted to do. And that was causing depression, because also I believe that when we don't really fulfill or follow our heart and our purpose, as Einstein said, if you put a fish in a tree, it will look at a monkey and feel like a failure all of its life. And so I was a fish in a tree at that point, because I wasn't in what I was able to shine or enjoy at doing. So there was already that buildup of sadness and depression starting to rise to the surface. And so that weekend, three things happened that one weekend. Firstly, I decided to train as a counsellor. The second, for some reason, I suddenly got this overwhelming desire to get interested in specifically Eastern mysticism, but a Vedanta kind of approach to mysticism. And the third thing that happened is my mum booked me in, kicking and screaming, to go and do this really wacky thing called Reiki. And it was like, oh God, this is probably just power of the mind. What am I doing here? And those three things cracked me open in different ways. And again, fast forwarding, I won't go too into the details of those, because I want to really focus on this journey of mental health. But fast forward maybe 2 years, and I'm counseling. As my counseling placement, I'm counseling people with depression. And I got kind of get into yoga now, and I'm kind of thinking they should do yoga, they should meditate. I couldn't say that as a counselor, so I'm thinking, well, if I'm advising people to do that, what is my stance on that? And but I wasn't really understanding depression. I was thinking it was something that you could just kind of not. I don't say this in a way that I would say is judgmental now looking back, but it's like, surely they just need to read a book or change their diet or get into, some or another, and it'll just all shift for them. It's just, and then I was blessed with depression myself, and it came out of the blue about 2 years into counseling people with depression. And I remember that it was a weird situation. I just ordered a book from India, and it was called The Third Eye and Kundalini. And I didn't know what it was about. I just knew I needed to read this book. So I ordered it in, and I start reading it this one night. And this whole book is about an Indian psychiatrist who walks in on a close friend of him who's just taken his life. So he's hung himself. And this psychiatrist, who's already into a bit of meditation, into that Indian culture, he has a complete nervous breakdown seeing his friend. But within the breakdown, he realizes he's having this, what he realizes a Kundalini awakening within the context of the breakdown. And the book is a psychiatrist's view of, so like, it kind of reminds me of you really, Joe, but psychiatrist's view of what we could call an aspect of the spiritual awakening. You understand the Kundalini and stuff. And so I pick up this book one night, and it talks about his breakdown. He goes into a pit of depression. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And the next morning I wake up, and it's someone like has shattered my soul with a sledgehammer. And I go into a massive depression, and I know it's depression straight away. It's like that the world loses its shine. Suddenly you could kind of lift your spirits with like something on the television, or you had these coping mechanisms that would make you feel good, and suddenly it's like hitting a hammer against a sponge. It's just dead. There's nothing that will bring you into happiness. So that was the start of my depression. And I kind of also want to make this conversational, mate, so I don't want to bang on for the next hour about my spiritual journey. But that was the beginning. Within the beginning, I had a 2-month intensive of just being bedridden, not being able to function in life, just realizing that depression isn't just having a bit of a negative day, or maybe it is to some people, but my experience was, it was like someone had unplugged me, and I had this body that now weighed 10 tons, a mind that was completely numb to anything. I remember thinking I'd probably kill myself because life's so bad, but just can't be asked doing that. That'd take too much effort, So kind of going through that. So yeah. So is that similar to your experience, mate? That was the trigger of it.
Oh, very much, very much. I mean, the depression side of things is I tried to cognitively psych myself into some sort of vitality. But, so, the spirit was willing, but the flesh was weak. And that's what I used to try and do is I could sort of sense this real sort of, it was like a lead overcoat on me,
Yes.
and there was a part of me that was thinking, what's the matter with me? Because, I mean, I've got one hell of a willpower, me. But when it came to this is no matter how I psyched myself up or other people would say to me, come on, you can do this. You've got such a strong willpower. I would remember thinking to myself, yeah, I know that. What's the matter with me? But this was a different feeling, Graeme. This was something that was much heavier, much deeper in my heart of hearts, and I've come to know that now as my essential self. And basically I can see now that it was so contracted around it and so obstructed that it was trying to break free. But all this other energy, like I think they call it a clip off, it's like a shroud that surrounds it. And it's basically years and years and years of socially engineered, fear-based control mechanisms, that I had allowed to happen to me, but I didn't understand it, And you mentioned, I mean, people see me sometimes as a religious person, and I'm not, I was brought up in a very, very religious way, in a Roman Catholic way, and I can see at the core of all these religions is the one truth, It's like to thine own self be true, basically. And the more honest and the more that you know yourself, the more this sort of radiance shines through, the more vitality comes through, the more the joy of living comes through. It's that helps other people. It's not by ambulance chasing and going to try and find things. And, so I can see now that where I've come to with understanding this is finding out what works for me and gives me joy and vitality and do more of it. End of story now. That's the simplicity of it. But that peace that passeth all understanding that you explained, I had that in a very, very big way. And I tried to take my own life, and I took a load of tablets and some sherry, because I couldn't afford whiskey at the time, So I ground up a whole load of paracetamol and sleeping tablets and everything, and I can sort of remember doing it. I was thinking, I felt calm doing it because I thought this will be the end of all this nonsense, this is the lunacy of it. And so I made a cocktail of it and I drank it, right? And this sort of peace descended upon me. And I thought, oh, thank God for that, because I wasn't religious then, but I could feel it all started to happen again, and it was almost like, I can't live properly. I can't die properly. This is a tricky situation that I'm in, Anyway, cut a long story short, within this process, what seemed to happen to me was I got a feeling that I was being turned round. And it's not like a voice said to me, but it was just an understanding of, son, you signed up for this. If you can't take a joke, right, you shouldn't have signed on the dotted line. I thought, what's happening to me? And just to put this in my own sort of way of explaining it, it was almost as if, right, I signed up for this lesson, if you like, or this journey or this experience. And I got a feeling of, look, you've made the right cock up of it now, because you basically, your head's been on back to front, right? So rather than run round chasing after everybody else, we want you to take your eyes from looking outwards and look inwards and find out who you really are, And Graeme, that was, as I say, 30 years ago, and I'd had, throughout my whole life, actually, I'd had sort of instances of being shown this. And I thought, that's strange. I wonder what that was. I even remember as a child, must have been about 8 years of age, I was cleaning the spokes on my bike wheel, right? And I felt this feeling come down, right? And I had so much peace. But in that, I knew that feeling was going to go, because when it left me, I was filled with sensitivity and anxiety then. So I can sort of pinpoint at times in my life when these things had happened to me quite a lot. Anyway, I digress, as I normally do. What actually happened was then, I was admitted to a psychiatric department. I was in there for about 8 weeks. I was in a hell of a state because I tried to kill myself. I didn't know what was going on. They were trying to diagnose me with schizophrenia, bipolar disease, all sorts of, they were trying to put a label on what was happening to me. And really, The only label I can put on me now was I was living a pretentious life, right? Pretentiousness was the problem. And when I say that, I don't mean that I was doing it on purpose, but I mean that all my life really was based upon acting, ducking and diving and dodging and weaving, changing myself to suit other people all the time. And I'd be looking at your face, and if you sort of grimaced, I would then change my story to try and fit in and make you happy again. And that's basically what I was doing. I was sensitive to other people's feelings, but I kept changing myself in order to supposedly please them, you know. I mean, and I don't anymore, Graeme. I mean, what you see is generally what you get. You know, once I realised that I'm all right as I am, you know, my intentions are right to be a decent fella, and if I can help out, I'll help out, and if I can't, I can't. And that's where it's become that sort of simple. And in that whole process, I've gone through the whole Vedanta route, Taoism route, all that. You know, in the last 30 years, I've been introduced, I think, to every indigenous sort of philosophy on the planet, you know, and I think that I had to, I more or less moved more towards Taoism and the work of Mantak Chia, you know, and the fusion of the 5 elements, you know, and I started to understand more about how energy works through the body and all this stuff about the light body and all this sort of business. So that's where I'm up to, you know, and I've learned Yang Tai Chi and Chen style Tai Chi as well, you know, so I practice that. And Qigong as well. Like we met the other night and we did some Qigong work. And the reason I understand it now is because, Graeme, I can feel it. I feel it. And I can feel when the flow has stopped. And when that flow has stopped, I know that I need to stop, take a step back, reconnect with the flow before I make any other decisions, and then think again, you know. And my PhD, as you know, is it mostly focused on how the breath is intimately and intricately connected with the way that the heart works. You know, and in circumstances where we feel threatened, our breath changes, which actually makes our heart change. And so our heart puts out a different signal, which puts us into a very tense and contracted state. Graeme, I didn't have a clue. But, you know, in Vedanta and in the Upanishads and all these sorts of things, they point you towards the relationship between breathing and the heart, you know. And Buddha's reputed to have said, you know, to his followers, right? They said to him, have you got any like quick tips or techniques on how to get calm? And he's reputed to have said, just become aware of your breathing. And that's become my whole life now. Right, and I'm running out of breath now, so I'll throw over to you to see what comes out of this. So my intention for this is not to try and manipulate it or anything, but the whole purpose of this Getting Real with Dr. Joe is simple, straightforward, practical tips that helped you, that might help other people.
Thank you, Joe. That's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And it's so Zen, your answer. It's like when you ask various Zen masters, you know, who really just that all means that they'd reached the mastery of their understanding of like meditation, and meditation is just paying attention, you know. So it's not a big deal, but it's like, it reminds me of the Zen masters, you know, when you say, you know, just return, what is Zen? Just return to your breath. That, you know, that's you know, that's how a Zen master would answer something like that. I think yeah, I'll get on to the simplicity shortly, mate. And what I think to maybe guide us towards that, I'll describe a bit more of, you know, after my depression and the night terrors, because I haven't spoke about this much really publicly. But I think it's worth it because so many people go through this silently. And so when my depression really kicked in, and there's a lesson, as there always is at the end of this. So as my depression kept in, I started to I felt I was going out of my mind because I completely lost control of my emotions and mind. And it was scary because it was like, I feel like I'm going insane and I'm completely out. I can't control this. And so one of the things that I would actually have euphoric experiences. Sometimes it would be like warmth, like Kundalini awakening, one with the universe. And then literally it was like someone just sort of pull the plug again. It would just be like pit of depression again. And during this process, I was having what I would describe as the night terrors. And so the night terrors were, the way they manifested in my path was, as I would go to sleep at night, I would start to see dark figures in the room. And then I would physically experience them attacking me. And the attacks were very physical, like, the one that everyone has, hands around the throat. And then I would also experience being, I think I can use this word on Facebook, but basically being raped and strangled, and very intense experiences, which were very terrifying and very physical. And then I would just want to get to sleep, so they would stop. And then as I would fall asleep, the moment I fell asleep, I would just have constant nightmares about being attacked by demons. And it was relentless. And then I'd wake up and the night terrors would start again, the physical, and then it was relentless. And it went on for at least a month, maybe 2 months. And what stopped it, and I would pray and I would meditate, and I'd have the odd night off, and then it would start again. And what stopped it is I was listening to I believe there's very little that's random, but I was randomly given a tape by a friend. It was a psychic medium giving a talk, and she was talking about the experience I was having. And she described that whenever she felt the hands or whatever, she'd be like, "Oh, push off. I just want to get to sleep." And it was like something, it was like, oh, right, she's not scared of this. And I don't know if it was an instant thing or it took a few nights or a week or so, but there was a night where I remember I was going to sleep and the hands came and the throttling. And it was a realization, this has been happening for 2 months and nothing's happened apart from me being terrified of it. And it's like, what if I just stopped being scared of it? What if tonight I just choose to go, you know what, I'm bored of this. And so the hands came and I lie there, and my thought was, instead of, oh my God, help me, I need, all that kind of stuff, it was like, all right, just get on with it. I want to go to sleep. And that was the night it stopped. It was the moment I lost my fear of, if that is whether it's a psychological state, I don't know, but I believe in dimensions, etc. And I believe there was something happening there. But what I realized was that Monsters, Inc. was right. Yeah. The first film of Monsters, Inc., where they feed off the fear of the children and they use monsters to frighten the children. And then the end of the film is the realization that love is much more powerful. So they start making the children laugh and, start clowning around. And it was like, oh, that's real. Someone has read the book, that someone knows what's going on. And that what I learned through that process, it's a cheesy saying, but there's nothing to fear but fear itself. That there may be energies on the universe, and it's worth noting this with what's happening in the world, I believe at the moment, that there's energies in this universe that perhaps feed on fear, and there's that require us to be scared of them. And again, I'll be open, maybe that's just a psychological state, but whatever state that is seems to need us to be angry, fearful, despairing. And if there is something that feeds off that, that's what, as soon as we stop acquiescing, stop giving it our fear, when we start to love, when we start to feel peace, it loses all of its power. And that was my experience. So the lesson in that process was, oh, whatever I am is much more powerful than I thought. And actually, the con of the con of making me believe I'm powerless. That's the con. I'm that powerful, perhaps, like we all are, that I can be duped into thinking I'm powerless. And in the duping of that powerlessness, that's the experience I have. It's like I can create my own illusion. And that's what I believe that's the part of, if there is a manipulation, that's it. It's to destroy the belief we have in ourselves. So that was the first lesson. what we are is indestructible. What we are isn't this physical body. And all we have to do is learn to let go. And you've already kind of touched on it for me, Joe. And when you were describing it at the beginning of our conversation, when you said that a lot of this depression and anxiety, it comes because underlying our personality is we're pleasing, we're not being genuine, we're not being honest. So we build a life on the foundation of fear and disconnection. And then really when the light, the pure consciousness, the awakened state starts to come and it goes, here, mate, this is what you're doing to yourself. And then we become terrified because we think we're being attacked, we're being destroyed, as opposed to the artificial self. My favorite, I'll stop speaking after this, but my favorite saying from Meister Eckhart is, I think it's in a film called Jacob's Ladder from the 80s, but it's a quote of Meister Eckhart, and this rings true for me. It says, if you haven't let go and you're scared of dying, there will be times where it feels like there is demons ripping your life to pieces. But if you've learned to let go and lost your fear of death, you realize that those demons were actually angels freeing you from the earth. And that was like, wow, that's it for me. That's the dark night of the soul. That's the destruction of the artificial self. That this is some kind of fierce grace that's happening to us when we go through this stuff, that's inviting us to awaken, to learn to let go, and to yeah. Anyway, that's where I'm so pleased, Joe. Any reflection on your experience around that is great.
Couldn't have explained it better myself, mate. And I'm like you. I feel deeply that the chaos that ensues in the world at the moment can be looked at in two ways: in a fearful way, or in a way that's challenging us to actually become more and more empowered. And I think when we say that we've got the power, I think it's not our ego mind that's got the power. It's this essential self, really. But as I was trying to explain before, is the essential self has really been imprisoned and in bondage through eons of time of conditioning, misinformation, misdirection. And I think what's actually happening now globally, I think there's a great big shift in consciousness now that's actually revealing the truth. And if we go back to yoga, we are now, in my mind, in a time called the era of the end times, and we've got the Hopi Indians, we've got the Mayans, who've said all this. This is the end of one phase, and it's the start of a new one. If you like, it's Kali Yuga, which is basically a time of disintegration. But I honestly feel now, especially recently, that we're actually coming through that and on the up now. I feel that we're on the up now. Some people would hope that there'd be a great big climax and our minds would be changed and we'll wake up in the morning with a complete change. It would be lovely if this event happens and it's like a flashpoint. I feel that that's not correct, right? Because I've read some more sort of, and I'll say realistic in my terms, that sometimes it could take up to 100, 150 years, right, for the process to happen, because every 26,000 years we got in this big cycle, well, we're on the upturn now, really. But I think that we've got an opportunity to see to feel how when we're in fear, and to know that the solution is to open our hearts, because it's the energy, if you like, of our deeper selves that comes through and actually dissolves that fear. There's a line in a book that I follow, and it says, fear, an evil and corroding thread, the fabric of our existence is shot through with it. And what that means to me is the fabric of our existence is our DNA, and I think our DNA is actually scripted, right, over years to be fearful and to be on the defensive. And when we're on the defensive, obviously we can't fully express ourselves. And we mentioned depression, right? Depression to me is a lack of expression of our authenticity, and I think people are starting to see this more and more, that not only have they been lied to, but it's possibly a reflection of them lying to themselves as well. you know. So my thing would be, and I got taught this a long time ago, if you're pointing the finger out that way, there's always three fingers coming back at you. And what that means to say is, as an adult, how have you allowed this to happen to you? Because give your finger away and immediately you give your power away, because it's trying to blame something external for the situation that we find ourselves in. And I know now, Graeme, at all sorts of different levels, that I've allowed everything or given permission at every single level of my being. And once I accepted that full responsibility, 100% responsibility, I started to become more and more free, because at some level, I was sending a signal out that was attracting this stuff to me, because it works by attraction, this thing. That's what the secret of attraction is to me, is what is it that I'm giving out here that's actually attracting this situation to me? So it's almost as if the soul sends out a signal to bring the performers in and the stage decorations and everything else on a daily basis to say, here, the stage is set for today. What have you got to learn today to let go of, you know? And so that's where I'm up to. And I don't know whether that's making any sense. I know that you'll understand, you know, but I've never felt freer in my whole life. Does it mean to say that there aren't sticky bits, or do I get this? Not at all. But once I get triggered now, this is the final thing I'll say for now. When I'm feeling disturbed, it's not the divine and free-flowing part of me that's disturbed. It's only ever my ego, whether I like it or not, you know. And ego to me stands for edging God out, if you like, or cutting off, if you like, the sunlight of the spirit. So my priority these days is, when I feel like I'm disconnected from that flow, the priority is reconnect with the flow and then start again, you know. So that's where I'm up to now.
Lovely. I really feel you, Joe. And one of the things you were speaking about earlier that has really resonated with me is one of the next thing that happens along this journey for me personally was, you described exactly, you know, it must be a standard thing when you spoke about the peace coming down, you know, because I would like to say that following the night terrors and everything, it's like, oh, I got it. But this was like maybe 20 years ago now, and this is still, I call it a circle, but I don't think it stays on one level. I often say we go in this circle that which goes up and up and up and up, and the bliss and the happiness and the freedom gets more, but then we're working on slightly deeper levels of what I call the unconscious mind that is also part of our energy body. And this stuff is like, as you said, you know, you said beautifully about I call it the law of vibration, that I was lured into a false sense of security, and I almost feel the jesters of the universe laughing at me, that they made my life really easy well, actually no, that they made my life easier for 2 years than it had been. And it was like, wow, I had a thought, law of attraction, money comes in, and it's like, yeah, I'm on fire, I get it finally, you know. And it was like, this is it, this is me now, I'm a soul, I'm a universal being. And then it's like, it does what it does every single time. It puts me on the podium, puts me on a pedestal, and it does it slowly, because it knows if it puts me straight there, it'll be like, oh no, I see what you're up to. So it just slowly. So I'm starting to get full of my, you know, spiritual self, and I'm in control of the universe. And then it's like, it pulls my pants down and pushes me over, you know, right in front of everyone usually. But it does it out of beauty. It does it out of the, don't get attached to anything, you know, it's all a game, you know, the crucifixion, the resurrection, these are faces of the same mask, of the same experience. Can you go through this whole process? And I remember following my night terrors, I had about 2 years, you know, it was 2 months of intensity, and then I had about a 2-year period of I couldn't watch a program on mental health. It terrified me. Just seeing someone who had any loss of control of their emotion, the fear of what I went through, and the extreme of the process of the depression. The depression lasted for about 10 years. And I even remember saying to people, and during that time, I started to lecture for Mind on depression and anxiety management based on my own experience. And one of the things I used to really talk a lot, so the first thing the depression taught me is that I'm more powerful than I realized, but I didn't realize that fully. It was just the start of it was like something lit a small flame that just slowly is still burning through me, you know, in my experience. But during that process, I had about 2 years where I couldn't watch things on mental health. Luckily, it's really weird. Luckily, I booked a holiday to Florida just before my depression kicked in. So I was a few months in, and I remember saying to my partner at the time, we need to cancel the holiday. I can't leave the house. But I thought but I've just, maybe I know, but I was so fuzzy headed. I didn't even know how to cancel the holiday. It was like, well, we're doing it then. And it was the weirdest thing. I took a little book on yoga with me. Then we went to Florida, and we didn't have much money at the time, so we didn't do the theme parks. We just sat at a hotel. And I remember getting there, and before that, I was so spiritual, so ultra spiritual. And sometimes I fall into that. It's like the cosmic joke again. It's like, go on, be spiritual, be spiritual. Haha, look at him, everyone, how stupid he is. And it kind of tricks me back into that weird kind of, you know, anyway. So I remember landing in America and just being in the sunshine, just feeling the heat, just starting to let go of life a little bit. I found this drink that I didn't know what it had in it called Mountain Dew, and I was drinking these 2-liter bottles of Mountain Dew every day. And now I know the high caffeinated drinks, and I didn't. So I was high as a kite for 2 weeks on caffeine and sunshine and all this kind of stuff. And that was another part when I realized what you said at the beginning, that the realization was a lot of my depression came from not feeling good enough. So I actually started to take on more work than I could handle. I started to do more courses. Then I did a hypnotherapy course alongside my counseling course, and it's like I like the underlying story was I'm stupid, so therefore I have to prove I'm not stupid by doing all these courses, and I just overloaded myself. So I started to realize that when I had a break and step back, that I'd done the depression partly to myself by trying to prove to the world I wasn't stupid by getting loads of qualifications that and a lot in subjects I wasn't necessarily interested in as well. So that another part that started to emerge was, well, who am I? You know, what am I genuine? I suppose like that's the crux of the depression experience. And if I fast forward to now, I guess where it's brought me to is the realization that that being divine is just being myself. But it's weird, mate, because it's like, to be myself, I have to acknowledge my divinity, or I get lost in my personality. It's almost like, I sometimes think it's like the heart chakra, and again, I'll shut up in a minute, but it's like the heart chakra. It's like, I see that I think we have a physical ego and we have a spiritual ego. And I think both of those occur when we're out of balance with the heart. So I think the physical ego is when I just think I'm a body, and I think that in that you know that we go into a fight or flight response in the brain of me and mine, and I need to survive, and I need to grasp, and I need to gather all the food and the money and the adoration, because we're in the physical level of the ego, which I think is it is extreme survival mechanism. But then I think a lot of what is called spiritual bypassing is, I don't want to be that, so I'll just exist above the heart chakra. Now I'm all love and light, and your problems aren't real, and I know that your relatives just died, but they're eternal beings, no need to feel sad. It's that kind of disconnection with the human experience. And I think that's we develop a spiritual ego there when we're just in the higher senses. And I think the complete thing is where I think that Christ calls it being in the world but not of it, and I think it's what they mean energetically in Tai Chi, of the alignment of heaven and earth, where I can hold the paradox that, you know, sitting in bed, eating chocolate and watching Netflix, or being at a retreat center on the top of a mountaintop, it's all just part of the same play. Neither is better or worse. This is just the way that the divine is expressing itself as you, as me, in a unique expression. And that when we land in that, when we finally say, oh, who I am right now is okay, then the paradox that Lao Tzu puts forward, you know, you could say that he puts it this way: when you try to shine your light, you dim it. When you try to be fixed all the time, you remain broken. But when you realize there's a brokenness there, and God, I'm just this human broken being, somehow that ends the brokenness. And if you want to know all the time, if you want to be wise all the time, that leads to not know, like a kind of a confusion. But if you can make your peace with not knowing, with the mystery or mysticism that comes from mystery, then you know. So we start to find this. I think the depression for me really started to lift when I could embrace just being normal, but somehow in the realization, knowing that at the core, I'm an integrated, I don't even know how to describe it without losing my normalness, but it's enough to be me. And that's when I really started to heal. So yeah, that's, guess, you know, where I'm up to with that, mate.
No, I understand perfectly. I think where I'm up to is, I think that the 0 point is at 3.5 chakra, right? You know, so we've got 3 chakras on the bottom, 3 chakras on the top, and 1 in the middle, which is the heart, you know. And I think that there's, for want of a better expression, there's lower heart and higher heart. And I think that the answer is middle heart. It's the middle way, because I think once you got a balance between the top half and the bottom half, something else opens up then. And then we go deeper into the soul consciousness, you know. And like Yoda's supposed to have said, is there is no try, because try immediately, isn't it? If you're trying to be something, then you must have an idea set upon a standard. But apparently, you know, there's no standard other than the way that you feel right now. That's where I'm up to, you know. So I can sort of feel myself coming out of balance, right? And it's either fear on the one hand or pride on the other hand. And they're the 2 polarities, really. Because what pride does is it steps in to justify the excesses. When I push myself too hard and I'm showing off more and more and more and more, like a false pride, right, then I'm out of balance in the head departments. Or if I'm afraid, then I'll try and gather more and more and more stuff so that my adrenal glands have kicked in, my root chakra's activated, and I'm trying to protect myself. So how do you get shut of the fear one? You hand it over to the midpoints, to the soul, and you say, look, I honestly don't know what to do here, right? Perhaps you could send me some inspiration or guidance, or give us an effing clue, because I really, really don't know, you know. And then the other half comes in. You can spot the pride, and you have to sort of develop a chink in its armor. And you can say, well, you're all full of good ideas, you, right? But look where it's leading us, you know. So it goes, oh, all right then. So in my mind, it's transactional analysis, basically, you know. You've lost the fun of being the child, right? And you've lost the nurturing aspect of that dominating parent, you know. And I think once you start to see those in yourself, the idea is to let go of them both, allow them to merge together. And I think it opens up a different place then. You know, we're almost like placed in a position of neutrality, where a new intelligence comes through, not intellect, intelligence, you know. Because I believe that we have to, as Osho would say, you know, you need to move beyond intellect, because intellect's basically just based on memory, and memory is the past anyway, you know. So to let go of that, some new awareness comes in then. I don't know whether I'm making any sense, but the way I gauge where I'm up to now, Graeme, is I just say, how do I feel? And honestly, if I feel open and flowing, I just keep going, right? And if I don't, I stop, take a step back, sink into it, restore the flow, and off I go, you know. And that's how it's sort of become. And it's leading me into all sorts of new understandings of things. I agree with you that there are unscrupulous forces that seem to be prevailing at the moment, that want people to be in fear, because they seem to feed off, you know, this loose energy that's sort of this loose energy that's knocking about, you know, they seem to revel in people being afraid, you know. So anything that causes chaos and consternation, they're winning then. So really, the way to overcome this is to get out of the fight, you know, because for by this time we have ceased fighting anybody and anything. I don't think that we can preach peace with a gun in our hands, Graeme, you know. And I noticed the post that you put up before with the two flags. I'm in exactly the same place, you know, because there's people on both sides of this equation, no matter where it's happening, right? I think it's important to try and be helpful to whoever needs help at the time. That's my feeling. And how do I know who needs help? I don't really know unless I get a feeling. It's a bit like when beggars are there, you know, go big issue and stuff like that. I never know what to do, you see. So I have to say to my heart, do I give this person some money or do I not today? And I get, well, what's the feeling? No, just bypass it today. Okay. And then I'll move on. And I'm okay with that. But before, I always felt guilty. I'd look away from them. I'd have to cross over the road. I wouldn't know what to do, you know. And hello, sir, how are you? And I'd think, oh, God, I'm never going to that shop again because that fella will be there looking at me. And, you know, but now I go like this in my heart. Has he getting any money or what? No, not today. Okay, then fine. And other times I'll come and I'll take a fiver out and go, yeah, mate, have a nice day and all that, you know. Graeme, I never know what to do. Honest to God, mate. I never know what to do from one moment to the next. So I have to rely on my spirit to move me to the action that's required in that moment, because it can see, like a supervisor or an overseer, it can see how the situation will benefit more things than I can, you know. So that's where I'm up to. I have this sort of, not all the time, I have this faith and this trust that this feeling is actually associated with an intelligent, innate energy called intuition. And it's like my sort of mini Yoda that's guiding me beyond what I can see. Over to you, mate. I don't know whether that makes sense.
Oh, so much. I'm exactly the same, Joe, and I'm increasingly as well. I part of this process, my main teachings have come in dreams because you know, I'm not a reader. And it's interesting you talk about the intellect, and I couldn't agree with you more, mate. It's there's a part I believe that we all reach, and I think this is what they call the dark night of the soul. I went through it for a few years. Apparently, St. John of the Cross went through it for about 40 years, which led him to be able to write the book, you know, I think called The Dark Night of the Soul, I think. And it varies from person to person. Mine seemed to go on. I remember saying to the universe, I was like, bloody hell, you had Christ up on the crucifix for 3 days. You've had me up here for 10 years. What have I done so wrong, you know? And it's like, and I think it was just bringing me slowly, just beating the pride out of me until I could get into the softer and softer surrender. And I think the dark night of the soul, as you describe it really eloquently, is when I saw it within myself as the if you like, the energy of my consciousness expanding to the point that it met the outer shell of the intellect. And it was about a 2-year period in its spearhead, in which it was like, I'm teaching about the Tao, I'm teaching about devotion and God. And I was like, I haven't got a bloody clue. And it was like, all I'm doing is teaching out of books. It's like, how the hell, I could just be teaching about ice cream. I actually don't know if this is real at all. All I know is that people have told me it's real. I've just believed that. I'm having no experience. And it was like, I went through a real 2-year of like, this is what if we're making it up? What if there is no soul? What if there? And it was a real deconstruction of the intellectual level of the understanding, so that I could move from, as you're describing it, a belief about divinity or soul or whatever, or Buddha nature, a belief about that, to moving into the direct perception and experience of it. And I connect with it increasingly in the same way, mate. I had vision boards and to-do lists and all that kind of stuff. And I use them to push against life. And now my practice predominantly is when I've got nothing to do, I just sit in contemplation, because that works for me, that works for me. And the contemplation usually is I do japa practice, which is just a silent repetition of the mantra, which really just keeps the mind busy, so that the nature that isn't the mind can be more available, so it quietens everything down so you can hear the silence more profoundly. And then I'm the same, mate. It's like in the morning, it's like, I don't know. Show me. What do you want me to do today? Give me something to respond to. And if nothing comes, I just do nothing. So, okay, unless something I have to do. And then and that's where it's bringing me now into, I would call it that there was a line in the Bible that I was drawn to about 2 weeks ago. And, Christ gives all these teachings. He calls it the teachings on the kingdom of heaven. And he says, like, it's basically, you only enter the kingdom heaven when and if. And there's about 20, and they're really like Zen koans. You have to meditate on them to get clear. But one of them just stood out at me, and it said, you don't get into the kingdom of heaven, which of course we've described as a state of being. You don't get into the kingdom of heaven just by saying God, God, God. It's only when you carry out the will of the Father that you enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, you could say your mother, you could say the Tao, you could say, as you described it, that's the heart, the center. But it's only when you're able to, I believe, be born again of that light, of that becoming your operating system, that, as you perfectly said, you move into service, but it's not I am serving, and it's not, oh, should I give this guy a tenner, should I give him a pound, should I ignore him, I'll just cross the road. Look at, I've totally been there. And it talks in the yoga tradition, it said there's different types of giving. It says there's giving, it calls it the gunas, there's giving in ignorance. And when you give from ignorance, you could just be giving in a way that makes that person's life worth. Maybe that you makes them dependent on you. Maybe that giving that money is the thing that they go and buy a bottle of something and kill themselves. It's like there's a giving from a place of ignorance, but it also says there's also this giving from a place of the sattvic nature, that a giving that arises from our true self, that actually responds to life in a way that brings healing and wholeness to the person that's on the not only the receiving end, but I think we benefit when we see. Again, I'm using words I'm comfortable with, but if you're not comfortable with that, anyone who's listening and yourself, mate, it's fine, I get it. But when I see God giving through me, that nature giving through me, teaching through me, loving through me, that's when I'm like, oh, this is so much better than me trying to run my life, like just letting that force like do its thing without me getting in the way so much. That's when my life works at its best. And so I'm the same as you, mate. I'm finding those ways of trying, I call it remember, surrender, and love. So I make sure I have those alignments. So remember is remember to be in the moment, or to do my mantra, which keeps me in the moment within my mind. So remember. Surrender is that, you could say, your will be done, like, okay, universe, you as on earth as in heaven, that it just goes an energy thing. It's an energy manifestation. And so, and then love it, like, I just check in, am I being compassionate? Am I being loving? And then that seems to bring a joy to this practice as well. So if I'm being compassionate and loving, I might see the guy outside the shop and know that, okay, something inside me doesn't want to give him money today, but if I'm being loving, I go, I verbalize something in a way that allows him to see, I see his beauty is important. So I'll say, all right, mate, how's your day going? Or something like that. Or I might say, do you want a cup of coffee or a sandwich? And other days I might just say, have a nice day, mate. Some of them walk past. And so, yeah, okay, yeah, I could talk so much, mate.
See, well, we operate in the same way. Every morning, I was taught this 30 years ago as part of a sort of program of recovery, from what I learned. But I do say prayers, but it's not in a religious sense. It means something to me when I say it, And one prayer I really like is where I basically hand over my willpower, my will, my choice, hand over my will, right, over to the care of the universe, which is, in my mind, is it's all power, you know. And whether it be my soul or whether it be the spirit that's driving the soul, and I don't get into all that now. It's just this feeling. And so every morning I say, look, use me as you want me, right? Take my body, take my mind, take every part of me, right? I hand it all over to you. Use me as you see fit, right? Up to that point, give us a shout if you need me. But I'm just going to say the prayer because I think it's important. And I had this going over to the university this morning. It just comes in and I thought, this, you know, look at what you're saying, Joe. And it goes like this: my creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. So that's the first part, is because I'm saying to you, creator, I don't know what's good in me and what's bad in me. I don't know, you know, because sometimes going forward and standing up to myself feels bad, but you might be thinking, so that's it. My creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Thanks very much. Have a nice day. And then I get on with my day then. So I then assume that if I get moved and something comes out of me gob like that, spontaneously, right, without me planning it, that's all part of a greater plan that I can't fully understand. And Graham, I'm not asked about understanding it. When it happens, I just go along and go, oh, that's strange, carry on. I don't even do that post-mortem thinking anymore of, oh, I wonder if that was correct, because that's me jumping back in again to get into that analysis paralysis seat where it blocks me again. And basically my attitudes are, forget it, you know, well, there you go, you know. So I've almost like stopped trying to work it out now, because if I'm really making the effort to hand over everything, right, and it's a bit like this, okay, if it's my day to go today, right, okay, make it quick because I don't want much suffering, but thanks very much, let me know if you need me, thanks very much, and then I get on with my day, you know. But the other prayer was, and this is the one that really sort of set things going, is God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Graham, those two prayers, requests, have saved my life, mate, because I believe them wholeheartedly, because I was on my deathbed, and it's almost as if like a step of humility to say, look, I really don't know what's going on anymore, but I know that you do because I can feel it. So I'm just going to try and trust you to guide me in the correct way. And for 30 years, my life has changed beyond recognition, you know, and I feel like I'm only just started, mate. I really do. So that's where I'm up to. Listen, we've come to time. We'll have to have another one of these talks in a few weeks' time, because
Beautiful.
What I'm hoping for is sort of some physical and practical techniques. And I know that, you know, yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong and things like that, you know, you practice and teach. I preach similar things as well. I'm also qualified in remedial massage and things like that. So I think things like connective tissue massage, nutritional elements and all that, I think they're all helpful things that maybe we can discuss. And I've got Denise Chadwick coming on next week, who's going to be talking about her newfound understanding of how the facial or fascial tissue of the body works, you know. And that was a part of my PhD as well. So we're going to have a conversation next week, and just to see if people get something from it, really. So this is what I like to say, mate. I love you like mad, you know, you're my mate, and that's all there is to it, you know. And likewise. You know, and you know, we've met in strange circumstances. We've met in Glastonbury together, and Glastonbury is another place that resonates deeply with me, you know, and I've got a feeling I'll be going back down there for some reason soon, you know. So all I can say is I'm going to hand over to you to see if anything else is coming through.
I think
By the way, sorry to butt in, but I never slept until I was 38 years of age without the light off, mate. Right. I had to have the light on. If it was a landing light or something, there always had to be a light on, because I was brought up with fear of the devil, right, and fear of the bogeyman, right, and they were deeply ingrained in me. And like you, I used to see all these dark shadows and have this grip in the throat thing and all that. So I understood exactly what you were saying. Right, zip it, Joe. Okay, sorry.
Beautiful. Thank you, Joe. I was the same, mate, and I used to scream when I was little, apparently. So I've always had that, you know, in the dark, and you know. But yeah, that's a whole deep subject we could go into. But I think so. Just I think, Joe, that for me this this path is very simple, but somewhat. I think the simplicity of it is that, as Lao Tzu describes it, it's how do I live, as he describes it, in a state of constant contemplation, in the presence, in the now. And so the essence of my path is simply that. It's nothing more than that. But then, as you're describing, and we'll talk about another time, it's like, how do I need a healthy body for that. I need to heal those parts of my psyche which stop that, the samskaras, the pain that keep me going into unconsciousness. So that the work is very simple for me. It's to be present. But then the work is to release the physical, emotional, mental, energetic barriers that stop that happening. And that's, so as they say in Zen, we're already enlightened, but we keep on running away from it. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's how to come back to that. But we can have a beautiful chat around that another time. And I have so much love for you, Joe, and it's so great to speak to you.
Thanks very much, mate. And I'd just like to say to everybody, thanks for tuning in. I hope that you've got something from this. And just to finish off really with a little phrase, you know, that if there's something playing on your mind, best get it off your chest, you know. So don't be like keeping anything in. Just find somebody, you know, a closed mouth friend, and just saying, listen, I don't want any advice from you. I just want you to hear what's going on with me, because I'll find out what I need to find out, but I need to offload it first, you know. And if you can find a friend who'll sit there and not jump in and say, oh, you don't want to be listening to this, that, and the other, you know, and that's what I think that the honest purpose of the confessional box was. It was to spill the beans and get it off your chest and allow the channel to open up again. But it got sort of misdirected once again, and the punishment came in. Oh, you've been naughty. 1,400 Hail Marys and a couple of Our Fathers, and you'll feel much better. And don't forget to put 10 quid in the collection box on the way out, you know. So I know that you know what I'm saying, but all I'm saying is what I've found is talking therapies help, but it depends. It's just a little cautionary note. It depends who you're talking to. And if you've done some really, really horrendous, shameful things, they're the ones that you've got to get out to let the light in. So make sure that you find somebody that you can trust, and then spill the beans. So that's, I don't know where all that came from, but I think more than anything else it's to get over the pride and the constant fear of you being found out. Because when I offloaded all this stuff that I was terribly ashamed of, right, it became pole vaulting over mouse turds. That's how important they became. They were really important in me. But once they came out, it was like, God, is that all I've been bothered about for all those years, you know? So they are, you know what? I never finish on time. I hardly ever shut up, you know. So I am definitely going to say, Graeme, thanks very much, mate. I'll see you knocking about, and we'll hopefully have another one of these soon.
I would love to do that, mate. I'll see you soon. Thanks for having me on. Bye, everyone.
Okie doke. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks very much.